Thank you for joining me on Diplomatic Channel. This week we feature two discussions. First, on the coup in Burkina Faso, as ECOWAS leaders impose sanctions on the new military leadership. Partner and Chief Executive of Next Year Security, Peace and Development, Dr. Ndu Nwokolo, is my guest. And second, on the crisis in Ukraine, as NATO says it has no intentions to send combative troops into the country. I'll be joined by former Deputy Head of Mission to Kiev, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogo. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Let's begin with a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles.
The Nigerian government has called on Nigerian residents living in Ukraine and environs, including students and their relations in Nigeria, to contact the Embassy of Nigeria in Kiev for matters pertaining to inquiries, consular and welfare requests on the following numbers displayed on your screen, and or nigeriaconsular@gmail.com and nigeriakiev@yahoo.com. This was contained in a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which goes on to advise citizens to take their individual and collective safety and security serious, avoid unnecessary travels within the country, especially to identified hotspots in eastern Ukraine. The Minister of Defense, Major General Bashir Magashi, led a 5-man delegation to Doha, Qatar, last week for a 3-day visit. During the time, the minister attended graduation ceremonies of the Atari Air Force Academy and the National Armed Forces Academy. The delegation also underwent a tour of the National Service Academy training facility. Later, Major General Magashi held bilateral talks with his Qatari counterpart, Dr. Khalid Ibn Mohammed Al Attiyah, on areas of mutual interest and key opportunities for improvement. Finally, Israeli President Isaac Herzog says his country supports the United Arab Emirates' security needs and seeks regional ties. He made the comment during a first visit to the Gulf state on Sunday as world powers try to revive an Iran nuclear deal. The UAE, along with Bahrain, signed US-brokered normalization agreements with Israel, dubbed the Abraham Accords, in 2020. The two Gulf states and Israel share concerns about Iran and its allied forces in the region. President Herzog discussed security and bilateral relations with the UAE's de facto ruler, Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan.
Welcome back. Burkina Faso's opposition parties are in support of the country's new military leadership, with the former ruling party and its allies calling for calm and transition to good governance. One of those party leaders, Eddie Kamboigo, of the Congress for Democracy and Progress, says they expect to see the military junta's willingness to govern by virtue, to crack down corruption, and to guide the next civilian government. Those military leaders are currently under heavy sanctions from regional body ECOWAS. ECOWAS on Friday suspended Burkina Faso from its governing bodies, decrying the resurgence of coup d'etats.
The resurgence of coup d'etats in our region is in direct violation of our democratic tenets and represents a threat to peace, security, and stability in West Africa. This situation hinders the much-needed economic and social development of the region. I've convened this meeting with the hope to address the urgent situation in Burkina Faso and find solutions that will restore constitutional order to Burkina Faso and stabilize the region at large.
Lorsque les conditions seront réunies,
The new military leader in Burkina Faso, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba, gave his first broadcast on Thursday, promising a return to constitutional order when conditions are right, and called on the international community to support the country so it could emerge quickly and resume its march towards development. Now, on Sunday last week, gunfire was reported around the presidential palace and near military camps in the capital, Ouagadougou. The government acknowledged the gunshots but denied the president was being detained. Days later, the military said they had President Roch Kabore in a safe place.
Et d'aller encore plus à l'offensive avec des moyens adéquats.
Joining me now is partner and chief executive of Next Year Security, Peace and Development, an international consulting firm based in Nigeria, which uses evidence-based research and policy in developing and building knowledge and skills for governing society. Dr. Ndwokolo is joining me from Abuja. Thank you for making time to be with us on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you for inviting me.
This is deja vu in West Africa. Some soldiers get access into the presidential palace. They detain the president. The government denies there's been a coup. Days later, the leader of the junta makes a broadcast announcing the president has resigned and that the military has taken over to rescue the nation from corrupt governance, so they say, and then they intend to work through a transition at the nearest possible time. What do you make of the trend of coups that have happened in West Africa in the past 3 years?
I think those who perpetuated try to be clever by half by not trying to say that it's a military coup. What they try to do is to make whoever is the president say that he has resigned and then that they've taken over. But if you look at the last a year and a half that we had the coup in Guinea, in Mali, and in Burkina Faso, the three of them are Francophone African countries. And you find out that almost the indices that are in one are in the other. So you find out that these countries are either fighting terrorism, fighting ethnic militia, fighting issues of political exclusivity, fighting all forms of non-state actors fighting against the state. So because of the fragility in these states, the political leadership are unable to muster the courage to govern very well. So it's easier for the military, who ordinarily should be under the civilian control, suddenly wake up one day to say, we think the democratic administrations are unable to do what they've been elected to do. So since they've decided to resign, so we are taking over to help the people to govern. I think this is what this has shown the last 3 years, and especially the last 3 coups that happened in the last a year and a half. So it will continue to be so. So what they try to do is that they don't want a situation where maybe organizations like ECOWAS or other international bodies will say, oh, you forced a particular president out of office. So they make them to resign themselves. But all said and done, everybody knows that these are military coups, so there are no ways about it. No matter the way they want to present it, they are sure military coups.
Indeed, they are military coups, no matter how, the junta tries to paint it. But ECOWAS has had an emergency meeting. They had one on Friday. Burkina Faso has been sanctioned. They also intend to send a delegation in next week. They've called on the leaders, that's the military leaders, to return the president back into office and to return civilian rule. How would you rate ECOWAS' effectiveness on the subcontinent, especially in the last 3 years? Within these 3 years, we have seen, this almost 5 coups that have happened on the continent.
ECOWAS, of course, we know is the regional political and economic body that holds about 16 countries of West Africa, or rather 15 countries of West Africa now. But the issue there is Nigeria is the sub-regional hegemon. So if Nigeria in itself is failing within its own state, how can he demonstrate power outside? So ECOWAS, in terms of efficiency and effectiveness in the last 3 years, without trying to be politically correct, one could say that ECOWAS has not really been doing what it should be doing. It's important for us to understand that the way most of these things work is that if Nigeria and, let's say, Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal, that are the three big powers within the region, are equally struggling within their own countries to demonstrate good governance, how can they effectively demonstrate good governance within the sub-regional body? So you could see that what ECOWAS did with, when it happened in Guinea, they come up with all sorts of sanctions. When it happened in Mali, they come up with all forms of sanctions. But now it has happened in Burkina Faso. They've not given the kind of sanctions they've given to the two, because obviously they've understood that what these countries are suffering are equally what they are suffering. So they are trying to find a political solution to the issue. Because let's be honest, what you've seen in these three countries are with Ghana, are with Nigeria, are with Togo, are with Benin Republic, are with Niger, are with other West African countries. So what we're trying to do now is to find a solution, or how do we help Burkina Faso to return to civil democracy? So without throwing all forms of against them. So what they're trying to do now is to find a way not to levy them so much, but find a way to return them back to democratic rule.
Yeah, but you know, these sanctions, you know, as much as, you know, they're meant to punish the military governments in these countries, Mali, Guinea, and even now in Burkina Faso, we're yet to see the effectiveness of them. I know that when the extra sanctions were imposed on Mali, when they were announced, ECOWAS countries shutting their borders against Mali, even the Regional Monetary Union also mandating banks to also not, you know, provide access to funds for Mali's military governments. I know that, you know, ECOWAS was commended, you know, for taking those actions, but really, are these sanctions effective?
Well, to test if they are effective is to ask how strong are ECOWAS economically. You know, assuming that the West African countries are doing very well, and you're trying to shut out, you know, a member state, then you could say it's effective. So yes, we can do that. Now remember that at the level where it affects the state, could be at the level where it affects citizens. But in terms of the political leadership, the military leaders in these countries, you're obviously not going to affect them in any way. So they will continue to be in power until when they say they want to conduct an election and handover. So you can shut them out, yes, but how effective are these economic sanctions or political sanctions that it will force them to leave power? They're not, the effectiveness are not much, so they will continue to be in power.
But what's the lesson here for Nigeria? Because I see that President Buhari is attending these ECOWAS extraordinary meetings and is participating in the conversations. What should we be taking out of this?
For me, I think for Nigeria and for other African states or West African states, first is, I think our political leaders need to start that you're in opposition does not mean you should work against your state. I think most of these African states, you have political leaders who work in cross-purpose directions. So it's easier for military to say, okay, if the politicians or the political class are not doing enough, then we have to step in and do more. So I think for Nigeria, for instance, I think the political class should love the country more than they love themselves. That's one. And two, for the Nigerian state, I think there are wars you're fighting that you don't need to fight. You need to start including Nigerians. You need to start bringing everybody together and face the wars where you really need to deploy your army. So I think that's one. And then issues of governance. Governance is key. we need to work on level of our fragility. If we don't work on that, issues like banditry, criminality, all these things that we're experiencing today are some of those indices that make the guys in khaki and khaki, I mean the military guys, to think if the political class can do it, maybe the military class can step in.
Dr. Nduwokolo, great insights you're giving to us of the program today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Diplomatic Channel will be right back with a discussion on the crisis in Ukraine. Stay with us. Welcome back. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the group has no plans to deploy combat troops to Ukraine in the event of a Russian invasion. He says allies have trainers in Ukraine, which NATO can help with building capacity, modernizing their defenses, including their cyber defenses, and provide equipment and defensive weapons like the UK has provided. He emphasized the limits of NATO's partnership with Ukraine and that the security guarantees that an attack on an ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance does not apply to Ukraine, since it is not a NATO ally. Russia does not want Ukraine to become a member of NATO because, in a way, it still sees Ukraine as an extension of Russia. While NATO allies the US, UK, Denmark and many others are sending military hardware, Russia is challenging NATO whether it intends to implement key security commitments. Russia has forced the US-led defense alliance and 57-member organization to negotiate over regional security by amassing around 100,000 troops near Ukraine, while denying it plans to invade. Let's discuss. Joining me now is Nigeria's former permanent representative to the UN and former ambassador to Switzerland. He was also ambassador and deputy head of mission to Kiev in Ukraine. Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, thank you for joining me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you, Marchi.
I know you've been following this story and you've been watching, the conversations on both sides, the rhetoric, the warmongering, and, the buildup of military equipment on the side of Ukraine as well as on the side of Russia. Do you think that NATO countries really want to go into war with Russia?
Well, not really. Well, not at all. Nobody wants to go to war. The consequences of war are obvious on either side. But, well, NATO would feel a certain obligation based on the attitude of Russia, Putin's Russia, in dealing with the other European countries and neighbors, and probably dealing with the rest of the world. This tendency to want to impose its position on another sovereign country and undermining that country's sovereignty. So definitely NATO wouldn't want to go to war if it can avoid it. Doesn't even want any tension in Europe.
Could that also be why NATO is not sending in troops, combat troops to Ukraine? I mean, you see all the other NATO countries, the UK, well, not sending troops, but at least sending equipment. Most countries are sending equipment. The US has a standby force of 8,500 troops ready to come into Ukraine if Russia invades. You think that, what you said earlier might be the reason why NATO is, stalling, I should say, when it comes to helping Ukraine?
Well, there are many points, a few points there. First of all, technically, Ukraine is not a NATO country yet. Yeah, so NATO will not have a strong obligation to send boots to the ground, on the battlefield. But we can't rule it at all. We can't totally rule it out. But as now, the position is support Ukraine as much as possible with equipment and many other things, which apparently is what Ukraine, for now, wants. They believe that they have enough personnel to deal with the matter, to protect themselves, and they have to fight they know that if they have to, they will fight their war. So NATO's decision is not necessarily out of a wish to tone down what it feels is its responsibilities and what it needs to do given the situation that is unfolding. But my own analysis that it may perhaps in future, if it becomes necessary, consider every option. But for now, it probably is not necessary.
It might help here, Ambassador. You know, I mean, you lived in that country for a few years. I mean, Ukraine. So you do understand,
Yeah.
you know, this power tussle between Russia and Ukraine, and the reason why Russia wants to invade Ukraine, why Russia needs Ukraine. Could you just run that by us again? You know, why Ukraine is important to Russia?
Well, of course, historically, Russia and Ukraine are part of let's say the same cultural brotherhood, which was why they formed the Soviet Union when it did. In fact, the story goes that the core of Russia started in Kiev. Yeah, that is what you call the Kievan roots. But so, because of proximity anyway, you have a lot of Russians in Ukraine. The language, there's a lot of similarity. So they've been doing quite a lot of things together. Even at the height of the Soviet Union, a lot of the nuclear weaponry was actually located in Ukraine, but of course, it was given up by Ukraine deliberately and handed to Russia. So there's been a lot of past interactions, which probably would have continued if not for the sudden action or unexpected action by Putin of annexing or railroading into Ukraine, another sovereign country, and annexing part of it. That action still rankles in the minds of the Ukrainians. And since then, a lot more tension has been growing between Ukraine and Russia. Of course, Putin wants to control Ukraine and a lot of other countries. And as part of its what we can call the Putin doctrine of trying to reestablish some kind of overlordship over, still pretending that the Soviet Union, as it was, a big bloc of power bloc, is still on, but that is not the case. But Putin still wants to reestablish that. That largely might explain the background to why Putin wants to continue controlling Ukraine. But of course, Ukraine has gone on. It demands its right as a sovereign country to decide what it does, whether it wants to go join the EU or NATO, and it has a right to take that position. There is bound to be a conflict with Russia believing it must control members of the former Soviet Union, and then on the other hand, some of them insisting that they have a right to determine their future. So that's the situation.
So, Ambassador, very quickly, I know the leaders are also considering a diplomatic path in this. What would be a diplomatic solution to what's going on between in the Ukrainian crisis?
Yeah. Well, they have been negotiating and discussing in Geneva. Of course, the demands that Russia is making, that Ukraine commits not to join NATO or EU, it's a little bit difficult to accept. So, and that in spite of various high-level meetings going on, the key elements of discussion seem to be very difficult to agree upon. So that is I will call it a stalemate as it is now. We'll watch and see how it goes on, but I don't think that Ukraine wants to be told where to be or where not to be. That's the fact.
Ambassador Joseph Ayalogo, thank you for speaking with me on Diplomatic Channel.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks.
This is where we end the program today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget you can reach us on any of the social media platforms showing on your screen. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.